For over 20 years, House Hunters has invited viewers into the journey of looking for a new place to live. This upcoming Thursday, we're getting a Chicago episode. I always love when there's a Chicago episode. We have David Viggiano here. He is a lifestyle expert, TV producer, PR whiz, and now he's going to be a house hunter. You're going to be on television, on this side of it. This is crazy. This is awesome.
Rudy, it's insane. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was thinking. I started my search for a house about a year ago, and I'm up one night on the internet searching, and I had House Hunters on in the background, and it's like midnight. I'm like, I wonder how you get on that show just for fun. So I go to the website and I'm like, oh, you have to fill out. I was up till about 3:00 filling out the application because they ask so much information. And I'm like, I'll just do it for fun. The next day I get a call. They're like, we're interested. I'm like, what? And it just all happened so fast. And I'm just like, they like interesting stories. And I had a little interesting background story.
So tell us a little bit about your interesting background story and why you might be looking for a new place to live.
Okay, well, the very short version of it gets very complicated, but this all happened pre-COVID, and with my partner, who is now my ex. I had bought a condo, he bought a 3-flat, and everybody in Chicago knows what 3-flats are. Everybody outside of Chicago is like, what is that? But it's a 3-unit building. And he was living in the top and being a landlord. And after a couple of years, we decided to move in together. So I moved into the 3-flat. We lived there for a while. I'm like, you know what? I'm not into being a landlord. Let's find a house. A couple of years later, we find a house. We live down there. Great. Everything was wonderful. And then, we start drifting. Years later, we decide we're going to separate. He has the cash to buy me out of the house. And I'm like, okay, great. I need to buy something. And the market's nuts. And I didn't want to be rushed into anything. I wanted to find the right place. So while this was all happening, back to the 3-flat, which is right down the street from the house that we bought, right? One of his apartments opened up. And I'm like, well, what if I just move in there temporarily to, until I find my place? So my ex became my landlord. So I move into this building, COVID hits, the market's nuts. And I'm like, so 2.5 years later, now I'm still living in the building. And I'm like, all right, I got to find a place. And that's what started my search. And they love that background. And then after I told them that, I'm like, can you downplay the ex part? Because I'm not sure that's a good thing. And of course,
they're like, no. David, you're a TV producer. It's got to go.
Exactly.
Number one.
They need the drama. I don't know if you read the description of my episode or not, but the opening line of the description is a Chicagoan desperately wants out of his ex's apartment building. I'm like, so I had to call him immediately. And of course he's like, that's awesome. So I'm like, oh, thank God. There's no issues there.
There's no issues there. What was it like to look for places? Obviously the housing market is crazy right now, and especially in the Chicagoland area. Was it easier in suburbs or certain neighborhoods, or was it just a struggle to find places you wanted to live in?
It was the biggest struggle ever. And I'll tell you why. If you want a small condo in a building, very low end, or if you have a ton of money to buy something very expensive, that market's no problem. But everybody wants something right in the middle. That's a good price, but it's really nice. Don't have to fix it up. I really wanted a single family home. I have 2 dogs. I wanted a yard, and in my price range with what I was going to do by myself, it was the market was very limited. And so every time a house went up, they would go like that, especially the nice ones. And I tell you, when I was looking about a year ago, the smart agents would do this. They knew they had a nice house, right? And I would look at this. I'm like, wow, this is great. It has everything I want. It has a yard. It's in nice shape. Why is it so cheap in this market? Well, these agents were smart. They would price them low on purpose and start a bidding war. And then every house that I wanted went for 50, 60, 70,000 over the asking price. I'm like, it was killing me. It took me forever to find a place.
So you thought it was in your budget, and then thinking going in okay, I can afford this. And then suddenly, whoop, sorry, David.
Yep. So the next time around, I'm like, okay, Don, there's a bidding war going to start. So I'm going to go, we started 5,000, 10,000 over is nothing. It's a joke. They laugh at it, and only if you're willing to go, you have to be willing to just put yourself out there. And I was like, I just can't do that. I just can't do that. So I kind of had to, so I live in what's called West Ridge, which is West Rogers Park, basically. And I love this neighborhood and I love the north side of Chicago. And I really wanted to stay on the northeast side, but prices are ridiculous for what I wanted. And I really wanted the single family home. You know that, impossible, right? So I had to start expanding my search and I started going into like Northwest's areas like Norwich Park, Portage Park, those areas. And I have some friends who they live in Skokie and they're like, come to Skokie. So I started going out into, I'm like, oh my God, am I really going to go to the suburbs? But I started looking at all these places, silly me thinking the suburbs were going to be better tax wise. And I'm like, not at all. So the taxes are what really kills you, man, really kills you.
It's also too, when I've been in the market for a condo, it's sometimes it's the price, but then the assessments, it's like just an extra $600 a month. And you're like, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, when did assessments in the city get so expensive? I remember it's like, 200, 250, maybe. Now they're insane now.
Yeah, definitely have to have the budget for that. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you were looking for. Obviously, a lot has happened in the past, couple of years. You were out of a relationship. Were you looking for an exact replica of the house that you shared with your ex? Or was this like is this David's like everything that he always wanted, or what were you looking for?
So I found this, what the house that we found is this traditional Chicago bungalow. It was 2-bedroom, 1 bath. It had an unfinished basement. We made a huge master suite in the basement. It was the ideal house. I loved that house. And it was really hard to walk away from. I wanted to replicate that, but bungalows are crazy. And either the problem is they're really small, and unless somebody built out dormered out the top or built out the bottom, you're not going to get it. The only thing about the house where we were was there was no yard, and I wanted a yard. I have 2 dogs, and a yard is everything to me. I want a nice porch back, hang out there, let the dogs hang out. So that was key, and that was kind of difficult, which is why I had to go out into further areas where you can get a little more yardage,
And somebody who has experience in television production and as a lifestyle expert, being on camera, what was it like to be a part of this experience? And obviously this is a show that many people not only enjoy watching but binge it. When it's a cold day, when it's a rainy day, I have House Hunters on, and it's 5-6 hours. I'm glued to the television.
I know, there goes your day like that. I know, because the crazy thing is, there's things I can and can't talk about. But one of the things I can talk about was that you watch these shows and they're a half hour and they go like this, right? Because they're really segmented and they're made to move. And I had no idea, and I should have known this being in TV, like how many hours of footage, hours. I mean, I committed 5 full days of shooting, like full days. And I'm like, we shot and reshot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of footage for a 22-minute show. And it makes you realize, like, as much as like being a producer, and I knew how I wanted to control my narrative and how I wanted to come off. And Rudy, you watch these shows and you see some of these people, and I'm like, oh my God, how can he be married to that woman who complains all the time, where he is such a pain in the butt about what he wants? You know what I mean? It's like, but that's how it's all in the editing. And I'm like, I really tried to control like my messaging and all, but I realized it's all out of my control. I have no idea if I'm going to come off like a complete irritant, a whiner, cheapskate. I'm like, it could go any way. And I'm afraid that any way it goes, I'm not going to look good. We'll have to see.
I'll say this in your defense. I think, if you're going out with friends to dinner, and sometimes you may not like a certain cuisine, or you may not be in the mood to do a certain thing, like that might, get on the whiny thing if that is, something that you do often. But with the home, this is where you're going to live. This is where you're going to, save for many, many years. These are the payments you're going to be making for, 15, 30 years. So, you definitely want to make sure that you're getting everything you want and not being pushed into something that an agent might want you to get, or something that you're not completely happy with. So I'm Team David on this one.
Okay, true. But you've seen sometimes people go in and it's like, oh my God, I hate the color of that wall. Oh my God, look at that. Why is this here? Why did it? And they're talking about things that can easily change, right? But it's fun to see that because they're whiny and that makes for good TV. It's like, I just don't want to be that person. I want to whine for good reason. If I'm whining, I want people to say, yeah, I agree with him, not be like, oh my God, shut up.
I know, and we cannot wait to watch April 21st, House Hunters on HGTV. Go ahead and check out David. Let's see how his search ends up going and what kind of place he ends up finding.